The bell had just rung for third period when it happened. Lena kept her head down as usual, her backpack clutched tight to her chest, eyes fixed on the scuffed floor tiles of Jefferson High's hallway. The crowd buzzed around her, laughing, shoving, gossiping, just noise, background noise. Like always. Then suddenly it went silent. Not completely, but the kind of silence that meant something bad was about to happen. You could feel it in your bones, like thunder rolling in before the storm hits. "Lena!" someone called out. She flinched. It was Madison Blake, the queen bee herself. Blonde hair like it was spun gold, a voice that could slice through steel, and a smile that was pure venom. Her crew followed right behind. Chloe, Brielle, and Harper, each of them armed with Starbucks cups and matching cruelty. Lena didn't answer. She never did. But her silence didn't save her. "Hey, Lena," Madison said louder, blocking her path. "You dropped something, your self-respect. Oh wait, you never had any." The hallway erupted in laughter. Lena's face stayed blank, but her fists clenched. Her stomach twisted like someone had tied it in a knot. "Oh, come on, don't be shy," Madison said, circling her like a predator. "Tell us, what's it like being the ugliest girl in school and invisible at the same time?" People were watching. So many. Phones were out. Some were even giggling. No one stepped in. Not even the teachers, who always seemed to conveniently disappear when things got real. Lena stood frozen, humiliation burning through her like acid. She wanted to scream, to run, to punch something, but she did none of that, because this wasn't the first time. She had learned that reacting only fed them more, so she swallowed it down. Like always. "Whatever," Madison sneered, flicking Lena's shoulder. "You'll never be anything more than a charity case. Honestly, Jefferson only lets you in because they need their diversity stats to look good." That one stung, deeper than Lena let on, but still she didn't say a word. "Come on," Madison said, turning back to her crew. "I need real problems, not social experiments." They walked off like nothing had happened. Lena stood there, surrounded by silence and stares, and in that moment, something shifted inside her. She didn't cry. Not this time. She didn't feel broken. She felt something else. It started as a flicker, small, quiet, almost nothing, but it was there. Fire. Somewhere beneath all the shame and silence, something had been sparked, and she was done pretending it didn't matter. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough? They say people become who they are because of the storms they survive. But what about the storms you're born into? Lena didn't always feel like a ghost walking through school hallways. There was a time, brief and far away, when her laughter filled a tiny living room lit by a flickering TV, the smell of cornbread in the air, and the warmth of her grandmother's arms wrapped around her like armor. Her earliest memories weren't of cruelty. They were of love, simple, imperfect, real. Her mother, Simone, was barely 20 when Lena was born, a beautiful girl with a wild spirit and a habit of falling in love with the wrong kind of men. Lena never met her father. All she had was a faded Polaroid of a man leaning against a rusted car with a cigarette in his mouth and a smirk that screamed trouble. When Lena was 6, her mom left. No goodbye, no explanation, just a suitcase and silence. "She's got her demons," Grandma May would say, never with bitterness, only sadness. "But don't you carry 'em, you hear me? They ain't yours." So Lena didn't. She carried other things instead. Books, worries, a face people liked to make fun of. Hair they called too nappy. Skin they said was too dark. Features they said were too much. In her old neighborhood, nobody cared what she looked like. But Jefferson High was different. It was supposed to be a fresh start. When Grandma May scraped together enough to move them out of Atlanta's rougher blocks and into this suburban district, they thought Lena might finally get a real shot. Instead, she walked into a school where the rules were unwritten and the judgment was instant. If you weren't rich, you were nothing. If you didn't wear the right shoes, you were trash, and if you were a black girl who didn't straighten her hair, didn't flirt, didn't smile, and didn't perform, then you were invisible at best, the target at worst. Lena learned quickly that being quiet was a shield. Don't talk, don't argue, Don't give them ammo. She learned to shrink herself down into corners, sit at the back of classrooms, eat lunch behind the science building. Notebooks became her refuge, not for math or history, but for writing, poetry mostly. Anger shaped into rhythm, pain turned into metaphor, because there was one thing Lena knew how to do: survive. But sometimes surviving felt an awful lot like disappearing. She thought about that night as she stared at the cracked ceiling in her small bedroom, the hum of her box fan the only sound. Her grandma had already gone to bed, her snores soft through. The thin walls, the words from earlier that day still echoed in her mind. What's it like being the ugliest girl in school and invisible at the same time? Lena rolled onto her side, eyes burning. Why did it still hurt? She knew Madison's words weren't true, not really, but that didn't make them hurt less, especially when no one stood up for her, not the students, not the teachers, not even the friends she almost had but lost along the way, because being friends with that girl meant social suicide. She opened her notebook. A fresh page, blank, waiting. Her pen trembled in her hand, but then she began to write. They say the blacker the berry, the sweeter the soul, but y'all spit that fruit out and call it rot. Y'all love black culture till you meet black pain. Then say, too much, and walk away. Her heart thudded as the lines poured out of her, like blood from a reopened wound. She didn't even notice she was crying until a tear splashed onto the paper, smudging the ink. She wiped her face. Not from weakness, but to keep writing, because if the world wasn't going to see her, then she'd write herself visible. The cafeteria at Jefferson High was a jungle, loud, divided, and deadly if you sat in the wrong place. Every table told a story. The jocks, loud and overconfident, threw fries and cracked jokes about whoever wasn't around. The drama kids took selfies and talked over each other like they were all auditioning for the same lead role. The rich girls looked like walking Instagram filters, their trays untouched while they sipped overpriced green juice. And then there was Lena. Table 13, far back, near the exit. Alone. She always brought her lunch. Today it was a peanut butter sandwich, a bruised apple, and a bottle of water. Simple, unremarkable, invisible, just how she preferred it, until today. As she opened her sandwich, she felt it, eyes, whispers, snickering. Then something hit her tray. Lena jumped, nearly knocking her apple off the table. It was a small folded note. She looked up. No one around her made eye contact. She unfolded it. Ugly rat girl. Stop showing your face. Her throat tightened. She looked down the table, scanning for who could have thrown it, but they were already pretending she didn't exist, and that's what hurt the most, not the words. Not even the laughter, but the complete ease with which everyone around her let it happen, again and again. It was like the world had silently agreed that she was just there. To be mocked, ignored, or both. She remembered the girl in her English class, Emily. A shy white girl who cried when someone made fun of her dress. The entire class had rushed to comfort her. The teacher made the bully apologize out loud. Someone even wrote a letter to the principal. But Lena, when she was tripped, in the hallway, when her locker was stuffed with gum wrappers and someone scrawled Gorilla Girl on the front. Silence, no apologies, no outrage, just shrugs, like she was supposed to be stronger, like she wasn't allowed to be hurt, like black girls were. Built for suffering. She clenched her jaw, screw that. Later that day, she sat alone on the bleachers outside the gym. The sky was cloudy, the wind tugging gently at her braids. Her backpack sat beside her, stuffed with homework she wasn't going to do tonight. Not yet. She needed a minute. A real minute. To breathe. That's when she saw him, Eli Walker. Tall, quiet, always carrying a book. He was the kind of kid that slipped through the cracks, not popular, not hated, just there. Like a background character with his own untold story. He sat a few rows down, headphones in, sketchbook on his lap. Doodling. She stared a little too. Long? He looked up and saw her. For a second she panicked, ready for the usual look. Pity, judgment, mockery. But instead, Eli just nodded, like, "Hey, I see you." And then he went back to drawing. It was nothing, but it wasn't nothing. She exhaled. For the first time that day, maybe that week, she felt the tiniest crack in the wall around her. Still, the moment didn't last. That evening, she logged onto Instagram. Madison had posted a story, a screenshot of Lena walking down the hallway mid-step, mouth slightly open, captioned POV. When the dollar store version of Whoopi Goldberg thinks she's the main character, over 300 laughing emojis. A few comments like, why she look like that the fair? Someone had even added, Gorilla Girl to the comments. Her hands shook. She could hear her grandmother watching TV in the other room, humming along to some old blues song. Everything was normal. Everything was wrong. Lena closed the app and threw her phone onto the bed. She didn't cry. Not this time. But something inside her snapped. She was tired. Tired of being mocked. Tired of being quiet. Tired of surviving in a world that only saw her pain as background noise. They thought they knew her. They thought she was weak, but she wasn't. She was just warming up. Every kingdom has its queen. And at Jefferson High, her name was Madison Blake. She didn't walk, she floated. Designer boots clicking across polished floors, makeup flawless by 7:30 a.m., iced latte in hand, even on snow days. She was the kind of beautiful that made people nervous to stand next to her. The kind of rich where you didn't ask where the money came from. You just assumed it always had been. Her father ran a real estate empire. Her mother ran the PTA like a mini government. But Madison, she ran the school. Not officially. That was the principal's job. But if Madison didn't like you, you were done. If she liked you, welcome to the top tier, instant clout, free passes, protection. And if you crossed her, Lena had crossed her without even realizing it. It started in freshman year. Lena had just transferred, quiet, bookish, unfazed by all the drama. She didn't try to fit in, didn't wear makeup, didn't flirt with the guys. But more importantly, she didn't fear Madison. And that was her first mistake. Madison had approached her at lunch one day, fake sweet, teeth all smiles. Hey, you're new, right? She'd asked, sliding into the seat across from her. Lena, cautious but polite, nodded. Yeah, I'm Lena. Love your hair, Madison said, twirling a perfectly curled blonde strand of her own. Like, it's so wild, super authentic. Lena blinked. Thanks. It sounded more like a question than a compliment. Madison leaned closer. You should totally come hang with us sometime. We always need more diversity. I mean, not like that, obviously. She laughed. Lena didn't laugh with her. She just tilted her head and said, yeah, I'm good. Thanks, though. A polite no, that was it. But to Madison it was public humiliation. A rejection. No one said no to her. From that moment on, Lena wasn't just an outsider. She was a threat. Back in the, present, Madison sat on the edge of the marble counter in her bathroom, painting lip gloss across her pout like it was war paint. Brielle and Harper lounged on her king-sized bed, phones in hand scrolling through the replies on the story Madison had posted. Yo, people are dying over this Whoopi post, Brielle snorted. You seriously ended her? She ended herself, Madison said, checking her reflection. I'm just the narrator. She's kind of creepy, though, Harper added, always writing and staring off like she's plotting something. Let her plot, Madison shrugged. She can write all. The sad little poem she wants, she'll still be ugly, alone and invisible, but deep down, something bothered Madison. Lena didn't beg for approval like the others. She didn't try to fight back, didn't cry, didn't play the game, and that was infuriating. Because if someone doesn't care what you think, how do you control them? That night, Madison scrolled through Lena's profile again. Minimal posts, no selfies, mostly quotes, books, and one picture of a tiny apartment window with the caption, I'll build my own windows if no one gives me light. Madison paused. She wouldn't admit it out loud, but it stung. She locked her phone and tossed it aside like it burned her. No, Lena wouldn't get to play the deep, mysterious underdog. This was her school, and no one was taking her spotlight. Meanwhile, in a quiet room across town, Lena was rereading that same quote she'd posted months ago. It hit different now. Back then, it was wishful thinking. Now it felt like a promise. She picked up her pen, flipped to a clean page in her notebook and wrote, You're crowned a queen made of mirrors, but mirrors crack when hit hard enough. I've been fists for too long in my own head. Maybe it's time I swing. She didn't know how yet. She didn't know when. But one thing was clear. She wasn't going to stay invisible much longer. The library was Lena's favorite place in the whole school, mostly because it was the only place no one cared who you were. Books didn't judge you. Pages didn't whisper behind your back. And most of all, Madison and her pack didn't do libraries. Lena sat at her usual table near the back, a quiet corner behind the graphic novels, and next to the big window overlooking the football field. It was her sanctuary, her armor. She pulled out her copy of The Bluest Eye and flipped to the folded page, the one she kept going back to. It had occurred to Piccola some time ago that if her eyes, those eyes that held the pictures and knew the sights, if those eyes of hers were different, that is to say beautiful, she herself would be different. That line always hit too close, too true. She was so deep in thought she didn't notice someone walking up. "Hey, is this seat taken?" Lena looked up. Eli's same tousled hair, same worn hoodie, same sketchbook under one arm. She blinked, unsure if he was actually talking to her. "No," she said cautiously. "It's free." He slid into the seat without asking again, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like they weren't strangers, like she was just another person. "You like Morrison?" he asked, nodding at her book. Lena hesitated. "Yeah. It's heavy but beautiful, raw." "Same," he said, setting his sketchbook down and pulling out a copy of Between the World and Me. "Books like these, they kind of feel like home, you know." She nodded slowly. She did know. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable silence, the kind where breathing felt easier. Lena kept glancing at him from the corner of her eye. He wasn't like the other boys at Jefferson. He didn't wear flashy brands or blast music from his phone in the hallways. He didn't try to impress anyone, he just was. And that made her curious. "What are you drawing?" she asked, surprising herself. Eli smiled a little. "Nothing big, just people, things I see, stuff I can't say out loud." He turned the sketchbook slightly toward her. It was filled with pages and pages of faces, students, teachers, random people in the hallway. But one sketch caught her off guard. It was her eyes, her braids, the curve of her shoulders. Captured in black ink like a photograph made of feeling. "You drew me," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," he replied, shrugging like it was no big deal. "I see you a lot in here. You always look like you're thinking about the whole world and carrying it on your back at the same time." Lena didn't know what to say. No one had ever looked at her like that, not like an object of pity, not like a target, but like a whole person. And somehow that felt more intimate than any hug or compliment. "Why me?" she finally asked. Eli looked at her, thoughtful, then said simply, "Because you don't hide. You endure. There's something powerful about that." Her throat tightened. She looked away, blinking fast. No one had ever called her powerful before. Not even she had believed that. Later that night, Lena walked home in the cold, the streets slick from an afternoon rain. The sky was purple-gray, the air thick with the smell of wet asphalt and quiet. She thought about Eli's words, about the sketch, and for the first time in a long time, she felt seen. Not like a shadow people step over, but like someone worth looking at. Maybe, she thought, this was the start of something. Maybe surviving didn't mean staying silent anymore. Word spread fast. Madison Blake's Winter Bash was the event of the season. Technically, it wasn't a school-sanctioned party. It was just a small get-together at her family's lake house. 15 minutes from campus, invite only, no parents and absolutely no rules. The kind of party that made people feel important just by being there. Lena, of course, had no intention of going, but that didn't stop her from hearing about it. The whispers in the hallways, the group chats she wasn't in, the snap stories she wasn't tagged in. Then, on Friday afternoon, a crumpled piece of paper fell into her locker. No name, no handwriting, just a short, typed message. "You should come. Let them see you. Wear red." It didn't feel like a threat, but it didn't feel like kindness either. She stared at it for a full minute before shoving it into her pocket. She didn't tell her grandma, didn't tell Eli. She just went. The Blake Lake house looked like a magazine cover, all glass walls, and glowing string lights with speakers bumping bass out into the frosty air. Lena stood at the edge of the property in her thrifted red dress. Nothing fancy, just something clean, fitted and unfamiliar. She hadn't worn color in months, maybe years. The dress felt like both armor and target paint. Inside, the party was chaos, laughing, drinking, fake smiles layered over secrets. Everyone was lit up like fireworks, masks held together by mascara and confidence. She felt eyes all over her, some surprised, some mocking, some calculating. Madison spotted her from across the room and smiled. Not a warm smile, the kind of smile you see right before the trap snaps shut. Well, well, Madison purred, sliding up to her. Didn't think you'd actually show up, but hey, bold move. Lena stayed quiet, spine straight. I like the red, Madison said, eyes flicking down her dress. Real, main character energy. Too bad this isn't your story, Lena. Didn't flinch. Maybe not. But I'm still in it. For a second, just a second, Madison's smile flickered. Then she clinked her drink against Lena's water bottle and said, "Have fun." The first hour was okay, awkward, but survivable. She found a quiet corner near the fireplace and scrolled through her phone, pretending she wasn't completely alone. Then someone turned the music down. Someone else yelled, "We're doing a game! Everybody get in the living room!" She tried to fade back, but a hand on her elbow pulled her forward. It was Harper. "You have to play," she said sweetly. Madison said so. Lena didn't want to, but saying no would only make it worse. So she sat on the edge of the couch while Madison stood in the center of the room with a wine glass in one hand and a wicked sparkle in her eyes. "Okay," Madison announced. "New game. It's called Truth and Exposure. Not Truth or Dare because we're grown. This is the real version. Groans, laughs, phones out, cameras ready." She explained the rules. Someone would be called out, and others would say one truth about them. No filter, no lies, everyone laughed, until Madison turned toward Lena. "Let's start with our surprise guest," she said brightly. "Lena." Silence. Lena's chest tightened. "Tell us, Lena," Madison continued. "What's it like being the quietest girl in school, but still somehow the most talked about?" Laughter. "Do you actually think that little notebook of yours makes you deep?" Brielle chimed in. More laughter. "She probably writes poems about how no one loves her," someone else added. Sad girl era. And then the worst came from Madison herself. "You think if you wear red and show up at my party, you'll stop being ugly?" Her tone was sugar-coated with poison. "Honey, paint a trash can gold. It's still trash." The room exploded. Lena stood trembling. Not from fear, from rage, from humiliation, from every unshed tear that had piled up behind her ribs for months. She didn't yell, didn't cry. She looked straight at Madison and said, voice cold and clear, "Funny. You spend so much time trying to make me small. You must be terrified of how big I could be." The laughter died. Phones lowered. Madison blinked. Lena didn't wait. She turned and walked out the front door without looking back, the cold air slicing into her skin like it was setting her free. She made it halfway down the gravel path before her legs gave out. She sat down in the dark, heels tossed aside, dress bunched around her knees, and she let it out. Not a sob, not a breakdown, just deep, shaking breaths because they had tried to break her. But the truth was, they'd done the opposite. They woke. Her up Monday morning hit like a cold slap. Lena walked into Jefferson High with no makeup, no fake smile, no apology. Just her hoodie up, headphones in, and a fire building quietly behind her eyes. The whispers followed her like shadows. That's her, the girl Madison roasted at the party. She really thought she could pull off that red dress. Low-key. Savage what Madison said, though. No one said anything to her face, of course they didn't. Cowards never do. She kept walking, one step at a time, past the lockers, past the stairs, straight to her locker, where someone had taped a sign that, "Read red's not your color." Right. She tore it down in one clean motion, crumpled it in her fist and threw it in the trash. Then, for the first time, she looked up, right into the eyes of Eli, leaning against the wall like he'd been waiting for her. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." Didn't say, "Are you okay?" He just held out a folded piece of paper. Lena took it, opened it. It was a sketch of her again. This time in the red dress, standing alone on the gravel path, head high, fists at her sides. But behind her, flames. Fire rising from her back like wings. Lena swallowed hard. "You were there," she said, voice low. He nodded. "Yeah, I didn't know they were going to pull that. I wanted to step in, but—" "I get it," she cut in. And she did, more than he knew. "You didn't want to be next." He flinched a little. "I should have said something," he said. "Now you did," she replied, folding the drawing and slipping it into her notebook. For once, the silence wasn't heavy, it was honest. That night, Lena sat at her desk and stared at her blank Word doc. Her fingers hovered over the keys. Then she started typing. Not poetry, not pain. Truth. She wrote about the party, the jokes, the laughter, the humiliation. She wrote about what it felt like to be treated like a ghost unless someone needed someone to step on. She titled the post, "What It Feels Like to Be the Ugly Black Girl in a School That Pretends It's Perfect." She posted it, anonymously to the school's subreddit, and hit send. Then she posted it on a burner Instagram account. Black background, white text, no name, just her story. She didn't expect much. But by midnight, the post had over 500 shares. By morning, the pie. School was buzzing. "I saw that thing online," a girl said to her in first period. "About the party, was that real?" Lena just shrugged. More whispers, more people reading. And by lunch she walked into the cafeteria and saw the impossible. Madison Blake, corner table, phone in hand, face tight because the post had gone viral. And for once, the queen bee wasn't. Trending for the right reasons. People weren't laughing anymore. They were asking questions. Teachers had seen it. Parents were emailing the school. The principal called an urgent assembly for the following morning. And Lena, she just ate, her sandwich in silence, smiling because for the first time, her voice was louder than theirs. The assembly was set for the next morning. Principal Dunham stood at the front of the auditorium with his usual polished demeanor, eyes scanning the crowd, lips pressed tight. He had a way of making everything feel like an official investigation, like everyone was guilty of something, even if they weren't sure what. Lena sat in the back, arms crossed, back straight. Her heart wasn't racing like it had before. She wasn't nervous. She was done being afraid. Madison sat on the opposite side of the room, her usual entourage, Brielle and Harper, by her side, glancing around like they expected someone to pop out of the shadows and point fingers at them. Lena didn't look at them. Not yet, it wasn't time. "Good morning, everyone," Principal Dunham started, his voice like a drumbeat in the silent room. "We are gathered today because of a social media post that has caused quite a bit of disruption on our campus. We take bullying very seriously here at Jefferson High, and the post that has circulated—" The murmurs started. "I'm not a liar." "Did you read it? That girl went off on them." Madison's face tightened as she realized he was talking about her. Dunham paused, glancing at the crowd. "We are working with the authorities to fully understand the context and to ensure that the student responsible is held accountable. We will not tolerate harassment, and anyone involved will be subject to disciplinary action." Lena felt her chest tighten for a second, but she didn't flinch. She didn't care. Not anymore. Dunham turned his eyes toward the front, where the assistant principal, Mrs. Palmer, had just walked in, holding a binder full of printed screenshots. The tension in the air thickened. "This is about the post, the one from last night," Mrs. Palmer announced, tapping the binder against her palm. Some students shifted in their seats. Some glanced at each other, unsure if they were supposed to be scared or just curious. Madison's jaw clenched, her eyes flicking nervously to Brielle and Harper, but they were too busy texting to notice. "Let's get straight to the point," Mrs. Palmer continued. The post that was shared on the school's subreddit, and later across other platforms, was written by an anonymous student. However, we've tracked the account, and the student responsible is— Lena straightened in her seat. Her name was about to be called, but before she could brace herself, a voice rang out. "It was me," Eli said, standing up from his seat near the back. The entire room fell silent. Lena's heart skipped a beat. She looked over at him, confused. He met her eyes and gave a small, almost apologetic smile. "It was me," he repeated, louder now. "I'm the one who posted it." Principal Dunham raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised. "Eli," he said slowly. "You're telling me you were behind the post?" Eli nodded. "Yeah, it's my fault." "Why would you do this?" Mrs. Palmer asked, folding her arms, voice stern. Eli's gaze shifted to Lena for just a moment before he answered. "Because the truth needed to be said," he said, voice calm. "And if anyone was going to say it, it might as well be me." Lena sat there, heart pounding in her chest. She was surprised, but she also felt relieved, like a weight had been lifted from her chest. The room was still, but she knew the storm wasn't over yet. It was just shifting. After the assembly, word spread like wildfire. Eli's confession hadn't stopped the gossip. It had just given it a new direction. People were talking about him now, talking about his bravery, his honesty. The mystery of the post was solved, but the aftermath was just beginning. Madison, predictably, wasn't happy. She stormed out of the assembly with Brielle and Harper, in tow, fury practically radiating off her. Lena stood at her locker, staring at her phone. She had more notifications than she could process, but one message stood out. It was from Eli. "You're not alone in this anymore. I got your back." She couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips. Lena wasn't sure what the rest of the day would hold. She had a feeling there was more to come. There always was with Madison. But something inside her had shifted. For the first time, she felt like she wasn't just surviving high school. She was starting to live. Later that evening, as Lena sat at her desk again, staring at her phone screen, something unexpected happened. She got a direct message from someone she hadn't thought about in a long time. Ava Williams. Ava was one of the more popular girls in school. She wasn't in Madison's immediate inner circle, but she had always been around, quiet, reserved, but undeniably kind. "I don't know if you'll see this, but I just wanted to let you know that I've always respected you. You didn't deserve what happened last night, and you don't deserve the way Madison's been treating you. I'm here if you ever want to talk." Lena stared at the message, uncertain whether she should respond or just leave it unread. She wasn't used to people reaching out to her like this, not in this way, not with sincerity. But Ava's words had power. Something about them felt real. Lena took a deep breath, then typed back, "Thank you. I think we both know this isn't over yet, but maybe it's time I start being a little louder." She hit send. The next morning, the tension at Jefferson High was thicker than ever. Word of Eli's confession had spread like wildfire, and though people were still buzzing about the post, something else was simmering beneath the surface. There was a growing sense of unease around Madison Blake and her usual crew. The power had shifted and they knew it. But Lena, she was ready to take the next step. It was lunch hour. Lena had just sat down at her usual table when Harper slid into the seat across from her. Lena barely looked up from her book. "Can I help?" "You?" Lena asked, her voice flat but cutting. Harper didn't flinch. "I just want to say something." Lena's brows knitted together as she closed her book. "What's this about?" Harper fidgeted with her napkin, eyes darting around the room. It was almost like she was trying to figure out the best way to say it, but there was no right way, not with everything that had happened. Finally, she spoke up. "Madison." "She's losing it," Harper said, the words coming out in a rush. "She thought she could just throw you under the bus, humiliate you, and that would be the end of it. But now, Sam, it's like everything's falling apart." Lena didn't respond right away, waiting for her to continue. "She's been talking." "About you, about the post," Harper went on, voice quiet but frantic. "She's even been threatening people who like your stuff or talk about you in a good way. And you're kind of scaring her." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Scaring her?" she repeated. "Yeah, you have people backing you now, and she doesn't know how to handle that. It's messing with her." Harper's voice wavered with a strange mix of fear and guilt. "I just wanted you to know I don't like this. What happened to you? It's wrong." Lena studied Harper for a long moment. She wasn't sure what to make of this. Was it genuine? Or was Harper just trying to salvage what was left of her position? But in the end, it didn't matter. Lena leaned back in her seat, folding her arms across her chest. "I didn't come here looking for your pity," Lena said, her tone sharp. "I didn't ask for your sympathy. I don't need it." Harper looked like she'd been slapped. For a second, she seemed like she might say something else, but Lena was already standing up. She wasn't in the mood for games. "Tell Madison," Lena said, voice low but clear, "that I'm not the one she needs to be worried about anymore." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving Harper at the table, wide-eyed and speechless. The halls were different now. It wasn't just the gossip. It was the way people looked at her. The whispers weren't behind her back anymore. People were looking at her like they were waiting for something, like they weren't sure whether she was about to break or whether she was about to break them. Lena had no intention of breaking. She had one goal, and that goal was Madison Blake. By the end of the day, the school had erupted into chaos. Madison, it seemed, wasn't done yet. In fact, she'd taken things a step further. Someone from the cheer squad had posted a video online. It was from the party. It showed Madison and her friends laughing, not just about the post, but mocking Lena's appearance. They'd added captions, including the worst. "Guess some people will always be ugly no matter how hard they try." Lena watched the video, eyes narrowed, and for the first time something inside her snapped. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel sad. She just felt done. That evening, Lena sat at her desk, phone in hand, staring at the video. Her thumb hovered over the screen, hesitating for just a second. She could feel the heat rising in her chest. And then, without thinking, she hit share, not just to her story. She sent it to every single student in the school's directory, every single teacher, every admin, every staff member. She even sent it to the local news station. The caption was simple: "This is who they really are. The people you laugh with, the people you follow, the people who say they're just having fun, but this is what they really think of me, of you, of us." The message was clear. She wasn't just standing up for herself anymore. She was standing up for everyone they'd ever tried to tear down, and for the first time in her life, Lena felt a weight she didn't even know she was carrying lift. The next morning, the fallout was immediate. By the time Lena walked into school, the video had gone viral. Her phone was flooded with texts, mostly from people who had never even looked her way before. "I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. Madison's going to pay for this. I've been watching her do this to people for years. It's about time someone did something." It was like an army of strangers had decided to stand with her, but it wasn't over yet. In the principal's office, Madison's father, who was a lawyer, had already made it clear that they intended to take legal action. The school was scrambling to figure out how to save face, but what Madison and her family didn't realize was that Lena was done waiting for someone to fix this. She didn't need the school's approval. She didn't need Madison's apology. What she needed was for everyone to finally see what they had done, and by the end of the day everyone would know. Lena barely slept the night after she shared the video. The notifications had come in like an avalanche: texts, DMs, and news updates. Some supportive, some not, but all of them making one thing clear: Madison Blake's world was crumbling. By the time Lena arrived at school the next morning, the atmosphere was different. It was tense, like a storm about to break. People were talking. Everywhere she went, eyes were on her, some with respect, others with fear, but no one was mocking her anymore. The first bell rang, and as Lena walked down the hallway toward her locker, she couldn't help but overhear snippets of conversation. "Did you see the video? Madison's in so much trouble. Lena's not even playing around. I can't believe Madison called her that." Lena kept her head down, pretending not to hear, but it felt strange. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, at least not like this, but she was done being invisible. She wasn't backing down. In homeroom, the whispers kept coming, but this time, Lena didn't care. She pulled out her notebook, focusing on the page in front of her. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was in control of her own story. Her phone buzzed with a message from Eli. "Hey, you good?" Lena smiled at the screen. Eli had become one of the few people she could truly trust. She didn't even have to respond with words. Just a thumbs-up emoji. The classroom door swung open and Principal Dunham walked in, flanked by a security guard. His face was pale, his jaw tight, like he had just lost a fight. "Everyone, we need to gather in the auditorium immediately," he announced, his voice strained. The entire class froze. There was a sense of dread in the air, a feeling of something huge about to happen. Lena stood up, walking with the rest of her classmates to the auditorium. She already had a sinking feeling she knew what this was about. When everyone was seated, Dunham stood at the front, his eyes scanning the room nervously. "We are aware of the video that was shared last night. The school district has launched an investigation," he began. His voice was steady, but there was no mistaking the tension behind it. "We take bullying very seriously at Jefferson High. We will not tolerate it, and we will take whatever steps necessary to ensure a safe environment for all students." Lena's fingers gripped the edge of her seat. She could feel Madison's presence before she even saw her. Madison was sitting toward the back, her arms folded, face an unreadable mask of anger. Brielle and Harper were next to her, eyes glued to their phones. Then Dunham turned toward the back of the room. "Madison Blake," he said sharply, "come up here." The entire auditorium was silent. Lena could practically feel the waves of tension in the air. Madison's face turned red, her body stiff with barely contained rage. Madison slowly stood up and walked to the front, glaring at everyone around her. She was trembling, but no one could tell if it was from fury or fear. Lena didn't look away. "Madison Blake," Dunham began again, his voice firm, "I want you to explain what's been going on. Why was there a video made mocking another student? Why was there a post online that hurt our community?" Madison's eyes darted around the room, her pride fighting against the truth she knew was coming. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence in the auditorium was deafening. The weight of everything was hanging over her, like a dark cloud, and for the first time she was the one who felt like she was being watched. "Answer him," Lena said from the back of the room, her voice clear and cold. "Answer everyone." Madison whipped around, eyes flashing with venom. "You think you can just ruin me like this? You think you're better than me?" Lena stood up, her voice even. "No, I just think I deserve to be treated with respect, and you never thought I was worth that. Now everyone knows who you really are." There was no turning back now. Madison's face turned redder. She opened her mouth to speak, but Dunham cut her off. "That's enough," he said sternly. "We are still investigating this situation. Madison, I suggest you take the rest of the day to reflect on your actions. You'll meet with your parents and the school counselor this afternoon." Madison glared at Lena one last time, before storming out of the auditorium, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. For the first time in a long time, Lena didn't feel the sting of Madison's gaze. She felt the weight lift. Lena wasn't expecting it, but as she walked out of the auditorium, she was met with a sea of students waiting in the hallway. Some were still staring at her with wide eyes, others nodding in solidarity. And then there was Ava, standing at the front with a soft smile. "I just wanted to say you did the right thing," Ava said, her voice gentle but strong. "I've been on the other side of this and I didn't do anything, but you stood up for yourself, for all of us." Lena didn't know what to say, so she just nodded, her throat tight with emotion. The rest of the day felt like a blur. Madison was nowhere to be seen. Her friends were too afraid to approach Lena, and the whispers had shifted from judgment to curiosity. Everyone had questions now, but the most important one was, what would Lena do next? Lena woke up the next morning to a string of new notifications. Most of them were messages of support. People from all corners of the school, those who had stayed silent, those who had been too scared to speak up, were suddenly reaching out. "I didn't realize how bad it was, but I've got your back now. You showed them who's boss. Keep going." Madison's losing her grip, but there was one notification that stood out above the rest. It was from Eli. "Meet me after school. We need to talk." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected a message like that from him. The air between them had always been light and friendly, with an undercurrent of something more, but this felt different. And she couldn't help but wonder what Eli had in mind. The school day dragged by, each minute stretching into an eternity. Lena couldn't focus. Every time she thought about the meeting after school, she felt a swirl of nerves in her stomach. Was it about the video? Was it about Madison? By the time the last bell rang, Lena was already walking to the back of the school, where Eli had asked her to meet him. The sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows across the courtyard. Eli was waiting by the old oak tree at the far corner of the yard, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his expression serious. Lena approached cautiously, her heart racing. "Hey," she said quietly. Eli looked at her and gave a small, tight-lipped smile. But there was something in his eyes, something heavier than usual. "Hey, Lena," Eli began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I've been thinking about everything that's been happening, and I need to say something." Lena waited, anxiety crawling up her spine. "What's up?" Eli hesitated, his gaze flickering to the ground before meeting hers. "I want you to know that I'm on your side. I've always had your back, and I always will, but I need to be honest with you about something." Lena's heart pounded in her chest. "What's going on, Eli?" He took a deep breath. "I'm not sure if you've noticed, but after you posted that video, everything's been changing. People are starting to turn on Madison, but they're starting to turn on you, too." Lena blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" "It's not just Madison's crew anymore. Some of the other students, people you thought were your friends, are starting to whisper about you, too," Eli explained. "They're calling you a troublemaker. A victim, sure, but a troublemaker." Lena's chest tightened. "I didn't ask for this." Eli nodded, looking guilty. "I know, but people are scared, Lena. They don't know what to do when someone stands up like you did, and some of them think you're taking things too far. They think you're stirring up a fight. That doesn't need to happen." Lena swallowed hard, anger rising in her chest. "Are you saying I should just let Madison and her friends walk all over me? Let them keep bullying people? Let them keep making everyone feel small?" "No, that's not what I'm saying," Eli replied quickly. "I'm just saying you might want to think about what happens next. This fight isn't over, and it's not going to be easy." Lena's emotions flared. She felt the weight of everything, the long years of bullying, the looks, the whispers, the way she'd been made to feel less than. And now for the first time she felt like she was finally standing in her power. But was Eli right? Was she really stirring up something bigger than she could control? "I'm not backing down, Eli," Lena said firmly, her voice cold with determination. "If they want a fight, they'll get one. I'm not going to let anyone walk over me ever again." Eli's expression softened. "I know, I don't want you to end up in a place where you're fighting battles on your own," Lena took a deep breath, the fire in her chest burning even hotter. "I've been fighting alone my whole life. This is the one time I won't." The next day at school, Lena felt the change. The whispers had grown louder. Some students were avoiding her, their eyes darting nervously when she walked by. Others were openly hostile, muttering behind her back. But one thing was clear. No one was ignoring her anymore. Madison hadn't been at school since the meeting in the auditorium. There were rumors that her family was considering legal action, that they were going to sue the school and Lena for the video. But so far, nothing official had been done. As Lena walked through the hallways, she could feel the eyes on her. Curious, cautious, even some with admiration. But the one thing she didn't feel was fear. She wasn't scared anymore. That was until she saw Madison again. It was lunchtime when Lena first spotted her. Madison was sitting at a table in the far corner of the cafeteria, her back straight, her arms crossed, a look of pure malice on her face. But what made Lena's heart drop was the group of students surrounding her. Brielle was there, of course, along with a few other familiar faces, but standing behind them was a new figure, Ashley, one of the school's top athletes and a former friend of Lena's. Ashley's eyes met Lena's for a brief second before she quickly looked away, her expression unreadable. Lena's stomach churned. This wasn't just a high school drama anymore. It was a full-blown war. By the end of the day, Lena found herself walking home with Ava. Ava had been a constant source of strength for Lena, and they had become close over the past few weeks. Madison's not going to give up, Ava said quietly, walking beside Lena. She's going to keep trying to drag you down. Lena nodded, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Let her. I'm not backing down. Ava gave her a reassuring smile. Just remember, you're not alone in this. You've got people who care about you. And with that, Lena realized something she hadn't truly understood before. The fight wasn't just about Madison. It was about something bigger. It was about taking back control, and she wasn't about to let anyone, no matter how powerful they thought they were, take that from her. The next few days were a blur of tension. Madison's absence from school hadn't lasted long. By Wednesday, she was back in full force, and it was clear that her silence had only made her angrier. The school buzzed with whispers, everyone trying to guess what was going to happen next. Lena could feel it in the air. Every hallway she walked through, every glance from the other students, it was like everyone was waiting for the next big thing to happen. But the truth was, Lena wasn't scared anymore. Not like before. She wasn't going to let Madison win. Still, things had changed. The world around Lena had shifted, and now she was a target. The day started like any other. But during second period, just as Lena was settling into her seat, she heard it. The sound of heavy footsteps approaching. It was Madison and her crew. Lena braced herself. Madison didn't even bother with a fake smile as she walked past Lena's desk. "Nice video, loser," she sneered, loud enough for everyone around them to hear. Lena's grip on her pen tightened. The classroom was quiet, all eyes now on them. "Is this really the best you can do, Lena?" Madison continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Posting a video and thinking people are going to respect you for it? Pathetic." Lena stood up slowly, her heart pounding. She could feel the eyes of every student in the room on her, waiting for her to respond. But she wasn't going to let Madison get to her, not this time. "No, what's pathetic is how you thought you could bully me without consequences," Lena said, her voice firm, controlled. She didn't raise her voice, but the confidence in her words was clear. Madison's eyes narrowed, and for a second, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her gaze. But it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold, calculating look. "You think you're untouchable now?" she asked, her tone venomous. "You're still just a freak who doesn't belong here." Lena felt a wave of anger, but she kept her expression neutral. She wasn't going to let Madison win the emotional battle. "I belong here more than you think, Madison," she said, stepping closer. "And trust me, I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, the room was completely still. The tension was so thick that it felt like you could cut it with a knife. But then the bell rang, breaking the silence. Madison turned sharply, her friends trailing behind her, throwing one last glare in Lena's direction. Lena exhaled slowly, her hands trembling slightly, but she stood tall. The fight was far from over. At lunch, things got worse. Word had spread about the confrontation in class, and now the cafeteria felt like a battlefield. Some students gave Lena nods of encouragement, others whispered behind their hands. But the truth was, no one was really on her side, not like they had been when she first exposed the video. Lena sat with Ava, trying to ignore the stares, but it was impossible. "You okay?" Ava asked quietly, her eyes scanning the room. Lena nodded, trying to muster a smile. "Yeah, just tired of this." Ava frowned, biting her lip. "I know, but Madison's not done yet. She's going to make sure everyone knows this is her school, and she's going to drag you down with her if she can." Lena stared at her tray, feeling the weight of Ava's words sink in. She hadn't expected Madison to give up so easily, but she hadn't expected this either. The relentless, venomous hatred. It was like a poison spreading through the school. Just then, Lena's phone buzzed. She pulled it out quickly, and her stomach dropped when she saw the notification. It was from Madison. "You don't know who you're messing with. You're going to regret this. Tomorrow, you and me. One-on-one. After school." Lena's heart raced. This wasn't a threat to be taken lightly. Madison had just declared war. She wasn't going to stop until Lena had nothing left. Ava looked at her phone screen over her shoulder, her face going pale. "Oh no, this is bad." "I don't know what to do," Lena whispered. panic rising in her chest. If I back down, she'll just keep coming at me. But if I fight back, Ava reached out, placing a hand on Lena's arm. You're not alone in this. But you need to think about what you're willing to risk. Madison wants to see you crumble. Don't give her that satisfaction. Lena felt a surge of determination. I won't. I can't. That afternoon, the mood in the school shifted. It was like everyone knew what was coming, but no one dared to speak up. The students who had been supporting Lena started to go quiet, unsure of where to stand. They didn't want to be caught in the middle. When the final bell rang, Lena felt a knot form in her stomach. She walked out of the school, her steps slow and heavy. She didn't want to face Madison, didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she was rattled. But there was no avoiding it. Madison was waiting for her at the back of the school near the parking lot. Her eyes gleamed with malice as Lena approached, flanked by her friends. Brielle was there, arms crossed, her eyes cold. You really thought you could stand up to me, huh? Madison spat, stepping forward. You think I'd let you ruin my reputation and get away with it? Lena met her gaze, her heart pounding in her chest. She was scared, scared of what was going to happen, scared of losing everything she'd worked so hard for. But she couldn't back down. Not now. No, I don't think you're going to let me get away with it, Lena said. Her voice steady, but her hands were shaking. But that's not going to stop me from fighting. Madison's lips curled into a vicious smile. Then let's see how far you'll go to keep fighting. The afternoon air was thick with anticipation. Each breath Lena took feeling heavier than the last. As she stood across from Madison in the empty parking lot, the world around them seemed to fade into silence. All the noise, the whispers and the stares, everything was on pause. It was just Lena and Madison now, and the battle that would decide everything. Madison's eyes sparkled with the kind of anger that Lena had seen before, like a predator about to pounce. But this time, Lena wasn't the one cowering in fear. You still think you're better than me, don't you? Madison said, her voice sharp, cutting through the air. Her friends stood behind her, watching with smirks on their faces. They thought this was a game, that Lena would back down the second things got real. But they didn't know Lena. I don't think I'm better than you, Lena replied, her voice steady despite the nervous rush in her chest. I think I'm stronger than you? Madison scoffed, stepping closer, her heels clicking against the pavement with each step. Stronger? Please, you've always been a joke. I was just the one who made sure everyone knew it. You should be thanking me for making you relevant. Lena felt her hands ball into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She had spent years running from this, fleeing from the pain, the bullying, the humiliation. But today was different. She wasn't running anymore. No, Lena said, taking a deep breath, her words sharp. You made me feel small, you made everyone feel small, but that's over now. Madison's expression darkened, the playful smirk replaced with a tight frown. You think you can just walk in here and flip everything on its head? You think you can get away with this? Lena met her gaze head on, not flinching. I don't think I'm getting away with anything. I think I'm finally standing up for myself. Something you should have learned to do a long time ago. There was a moment of silence as the two girls stared at each other, sizing each other up. The crowd behind Madison murmured, but it didn't matter. It was just Lena and Madison now. The others didn't matter, not anymore, and then it happened. And then it. Madison lunged forward, shoving Lena hard in the chest. Lena staggered backward but didn't fall. Her heart raced, but her legs remained steady. Oh, we're doing this now, huh? Lena muttered under her breath, her adrenaline kicking in. Without thinking, she pushed Madison back harder than she expected, knocking her off balance. Madison's eyes flashed with fury. She straightened quickly, her hands balling into fists. You want to play? Fine, let's see how long you last. The world around them seemed to narrow, the chaos fading into the background as Madison charged forward, her fists flying. Lena dodged the first blow easily, her body reacting out of instinct, and in that moment she knew she wasn't going to let Madison get the best of her again. She blocked another hit, using Madison's own momentum against her. Lena shoved her back, causing Madison to stumble. For a brief second, Lena thought she saw something unfamiliar in Madison's eyes. Fear. But it was quickly replaced with rage. You think you're a fighter? Madison sneered, her voice low. You're nothing but a weak little girl who got lucky with one stupid video. Lena's breath quickened, but she kept her focus. Every taunt, every insult, every little push that Madison had given her in the past, it was all coming to a head now. I'm not weak, Lena said, her voice cold, as she stepped forward and shoved Madison back again. And I'm done letting. You make me feel like I am. But as Lena prepared to take another step forward, something shifted. One of Madison's friends, Brielle, suddenly stepped in, grabbing Lena's arm and yanking her back with a strength that surprised her. That's enough, Brielle hissed, her voice sharp. You want to fight, Madison? Fine, but you don't. Get to drag the rest of us into it. Lena struggled to break free, but Brielle held firm. The crowd watched, some of them looking uncertain, but no one moved to intervene. They were all waiting for someone to make a move, to say something that would end this. But Lena wasn't going to let this end with her being pushed aside, not anymore. Let me go, Lena said, her voice low but filled with a quiet fury. Brielle hesitated, her eyes flickering between Madison and Lena. Finally, with a frustrated grunt, she released Lena, stepping back and crossing her arms over her chest. Madison's eyes widened in surprise, but she quickly regained her composure. This isn't over, Lena, Madison warned, her tone dark. I'm not done with you. Lena nodded, her jaw clenched. I know. The rest of the afternoon felt like a blur. The school was abuzz with rumors, but Lena didn't care. For the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of clarity. The fight wasn't just about standing up to Madison, it was about standing up for herself, and for every other person who had been too scared to speak out. As Lena walked home, she replayed the confrontation in her head. Madison had thrown everything at her, but Lena had stood her ground and she wasn't backing down. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lena received another message. It was from Eli. You did good today. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, and just know you've got people on your side. Lena smiled, a sense of warmth spreading through her chest. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't alone. The day after the fight, Lena woke up to the usual routine. The same mirror, the same house, the same world. But today felt different. The events of yesterday hung in the air like a cloud, thick and heavy. She couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed, because it had. She got ready for school, her movements mechanical, but her mind was racing. Her phone buzzed on the bed, and Lena's stomach dropped when she saw the text notification. It was from Ava. Are you okay? I heard what happened yesterday. Be careful today. Lena stared at the message for a long moment before typing a quick reply. I'm fine. Just trying to get through today. She didn't tell Ava how shaken she felt. She couldn't. Not yet. She had fought back. She had stood her ground. But now the reality of what that meant was starting to set in. As she walked to school, Lena noticed the way people looked at her now, differently. Some students gave her nods of encouragement, others whispered behind their hands. But it wasn't the same as before. She wasn't the same. The moment she stepped into the school, the whispers started. Some of it was praise, but most of it was doubt, uncertainty. Madison was still a force to be reckoned with, and Lena knew that what had happened yesterday was only the beginning. The question was, would anyone stand with her when Madison turned her wrath on them too? The bell rang and Lena walked to her first class with a quiet determination. She couldn't afford to let the tension around her get to her, not today. By lunch, things were already spiraling. Word had spread quickly about the confrontation between Lena and Madison, and it was no longer just a whisper. It was loud, it was public, and it was everywhere. Lena had never felt so visible in her entire life. When she entered the cafeteria, she immediately saw Madison's usual table. Madison was sitting with Brielle, laughing and chatting with a group of her friends. But there was something different about her. The fire in her eyes, the anger in her expression. It was like she was just waiting for an excuse to lash out again. Lena felt a knot in her stomach, but she refused to show fear. Instead, she walked toward her usual table, where Ava was already waiting for her. You good? Ava asked, concern written all over her face. Lena forced a smile. I'm fine. Just tired. But Ava wasn't fooled. You sure? You know Madison isn't done with you, right? Lena nodded, glancing over at Madison's table. I know, but I'm not backing down. Ava looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. You're not alone in this, Lena. You've got people in your corner. And you've got me. Lena smiled, feeling a small sense of relief. Ava was right. She wasn't alone. As the day wore on, the tension only grew. In every class, every hallway, there were whispers. People talking about the fight, about Lena standing up to Madison. It wasn't just the students. Even some of the teachers had heard the rumors, and Lena caught the way they watched her when she entered the room. It wasn't with judgment, but it was with curiosity. It felt like everyone was waiting for something else to happen. After school, Lena was walking to her locker when she felt it, the presence of someone behind her. She turned around, and there stood Madison, flanked by her two closest friends. Brielle was there, arms crossed, her eyes cold, while the other girl, Taylor, had a smirk on her face. Lena's heart raced, but she didn't flinch. Well, well, Madison said, stepping forward. Look who's still pretending she's not a freak. Lena's jaw clenched, but she stayed calm. I'm not pretending anything. I'm just living my life, Madison. Something you might want to try. Madison's eyes narrowed, and she took a step closer. You really think you've won? You think you're better than me now? Lena didn't back down. I'm not better than you, but I'm done letting you control everything. I'm done being scared of you. For a moment, Madison looked like she was about to lash out, but instead she simply smirked. You'll regret this, Lena. You and your little friends can't protect you forever. Lena felt her anger surge, but she kept it in check. I'm not scared of you anymore, Madison. Without another word, Madison turned and walked away, her friends trailing behind her. Lena stood there for a moment, breathing heavily. The threat was still there. Madison wasn't done, but something had shifted in Lena. She wasn't going to let Madison's words control her anymore. That night, Lena lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. It was hard to shake the feeling of unease that lingered in her chest. She knew Madison wasn't finished, and she knew there would be more to come. But Lena had come a long way. She wasn't the same person who used to run from every confrontation. She had fought back, and she was still standing. But the question was, how much longer could she keep going? The phone buzzed again, pulling Lena from her thoughts. This time it was a message from Eli. You're doing great, Lena. Don't let them tear you down. We've got your back. Always. Lena smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't alone. The weeks following the fight felt like a pressure cooker, each day building on the last. Lena's life had become a strange balancing act, between the pressure of her schoolwork, the whispered rumors that never seemed to stop, and the growing tension with Madison. Every time she thought the storm had passed, it would kick up again, fiercer and more volatile than before. It was the last period of the day, and Lena had a sinking feeling in her stomach as she walked to her history class. Her mind was preoccupied with everything that had been happening. Every classroom, every hallway, everyone was talking about it. Everyone had an opinion. Did you hear what happened at lunch today? Lena's going to snap. She doesn't. I know what she's up against. I heard Madison's planning something big. It's going to be ugly. The rumors were worse now than they'd ever been, and Lena hated the way people looked at her. They weren't just staring at her anymore. They were watching her with pity. They were watching to see how long she could last. When Lena walked into the classroom, the whispers seemed to stop for a split second, but only for a moment. She slid into her seat, trying to ignore the eyes that were on her. She had to focus. She had to push through. The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. As Lena packed her things, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out, seeing a message from Ava. Meet me at the courtyard after school. We need to talk. It's about Madison. Lena's stomach churned. Every time someone mentioned Madison, it felt like the ground beneath her feet shifted. What now? She pushed the thought away and made her way to the courtyard, trying to breathe through the unease in her chest. When she arrived, Ava was already sitting on the stone bench, looking serious. What's going on? Lena asked, taking a seat beside her. Ava glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Madison's not done with you, Lena. She's been telling people she's going to make your life hell. She's trying to get you expelled. Lena felt a cold wave of panic wash over her, but she didn't let it show. She knew Madison had a temper, but this was something else entirely. Expelled? Lena repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Ava nodded, her face full of concern. She's already talking to the principal. She's got people on her side, Brielle, Taylor, the usual crew. They're spreading lies, telling anyone who'll listen that you started the fight, that you attacked her. Lena's mind raced, her pulse quickening. It was one thing for Madison to bully her, but now she was trying to destroy her entire reputation. They can't do that, Lena said, trying to sound confident, but the doubt in her voice betrayed her. I didn't start the fight, it was self-defense. Ava's eyes softened, but there was a sharpness to her words. I know that. You know that. But it doesn't matter. Madison's got power in this school, and she's not afraid to use it. You've seen what she's capable of. Lena sat in silence, her hands gripping her backpack straps. What was she supposed to do? She wasn't going to let Madison win. She wasn't going to let her destroy her like this. Ava's voice pulled her from her thoughts. Lena, you need to do something. You can't let Madison walk all over you. I'm not, Lena said, her voice steadier than she felt. But I don't know how to fight this. I don't have anyone on my side. Ava shook her head, her expression softening. You've got me. You've got Eli. And a lot of people in this school are starting to see you for who you really are, not the quiet girl Madison wants them to think you are. Lena swallowed hard. Ava was right. The truth was on her side. And if she backed down now, if she let Madison destroy everything she had worked for, it would only prove Madison right, that Lena was weak. She wouldn't let that happen. The next day, Lena walked into school with a new sense of determination. She had a plan. She didn't know if it would work, but she couldn't let Madison ruin her life any longer. She spent the day gathering evidence, talking to people who had witnessed the fight, collecting screenshots of the rumors that Madison had been spreading. By lunch, she had compiled enough material to go to the one person who could help her, the principal. When the bell rang for the end of the day, Lena made her way to Mr. Hayes's office. Her palms were sweaty, but she pressed on. She couldn't wait any longer. This had to end now. The principal's office was quiet, and the smell of paper and coffee lingered in the air. Lena sat across from Mr. Hayes, her heart pounding in her chest. I know why you're here, Lena, Mr. Hayes said, looking at her with a neutral expression. I've heard the rumors, and I've spoken to Madison. She's accused you of attacking her. Lena's breath caught in her throat, but she quickly recovered. It wasn't like that, she said, her voice steady. I didn't start the fight. I was defending myself. Mr. Hayes nodded slowly, taking a deep breath. I've seen the footage from the security cameras, Lena. It's clear that you were provoked. But Madison has a lot of people on her side, and they're saying you're the one who started everything. Lena clenched her fists in her lap. I've got proof, she said, sliding the screenshots and witness statements across the desk. I'm not lying. I'm not making this up. Mr. Hayes studied the documents carefully, his brow furrowed. Finally, he looked up at her. This is serious, Lena. I'm going to need to investigate further. But you've got my word. I'll do everything I can to make sure the truth comes out. That night, Lena felt a glimmer of hope. The wheels were in motion and Madison's power was starting to crack. But Lena knew that this was far from over. Madison wasn't going to let go that easily. The real fight was just beginning. The next few days were a whirlwind for Lena. Every moment felt like a ticking clock, with each second bringing her closer to either the truth prevailing or Madison's victory. As promised, Principal Hayes had launched an investigation into the events surrounding the fight. Lena had done everything she could to present the truth, but now it was out of her hands. When Lena walked into school that morning, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread creeping over her. She was walking into the lion's den. Madison was more dangerous now than ever, and Lena knew she had to keep her guard up. If she let her emotions show even for a second, it would give Madison exactly what she wanted. As she passed by the lockers, Lena heard the familiar whispering. Did you hear? Principal Hayes is looking into it. Madison's furious. The rumors were still swirling, and Lena couldn't help but feel the weight of every judgmental gaze as she moved through the hallways. But she didn't let it stop her. She kept her head high, focused on the prize. finding out if the truth was enough to take down Madison once and for all. The first class of the day passed in a blur. Lena could barely concentrate on the lesson, as her mind was consumed by the thought of the investigation. Was Madison going to get away with it? Or was Lena going to be able to show everyone the real Madison, the manipulative girl who had made her life a living nightmare? During lunch, Lena sat with Ava in the cafeteria, the silence between them speaking volumes. "You heard anything?" Lena asked, her voice quiet as she picked at her food. Ava shook her head. "Nothing new, but I'm sure Principal Hayes is handling it." Lena sighed, feeling the weight of the unknown. She hated feeling so powerless, like the truth was something she had to wait for, rather than something she could control. "Do you think they'll believe me?" Lena asked, the doubt creeping in. Ava turned to her, her expression serious. "They have to. You've got the proof, Lena. You've got everything to show you didn't start the fight. And people are starting to see who Madison really is." Lena nodded, but she wasn't entirely convinced. Madison was dangerous. She had power, and power, Lena knew, could manipulate everything. After lunch, Lena went to her locker to grab her books. She was just about to leave when someone tapped her on the shoulder. She turned around, her heart skipping a beat as she saw Madison standing there, flanked by Brielle and Taylor. Madison's usual smirk was nowhere to be found. Instead, her face was tight with anger. "Lena," Madison said, her voice low. "You think you've won, don't you? You think the principal's going to believe your little sob story?" Lena stood tall, refusing to show any fear. "I'm not the one lying, Madison. I didn't start that fight, you know that." Madison's eyes flashed with fury. "You have no idea what you're up against. You think this is just about a fight? You think you're going to walk away from this?" Lena met her gaze. "I'm not walking away. You're the one who started this, and I'm going to make sure the truth comes out." Madison took a step closer, her voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "I'll make sure your life is a living hell, Lena. You'll regret standing up to me." Before Lena could respond, Madison turned and stalked off, her friends following closely behind. Lena felt a chill run down her spine. The fight wasn't over yet. In fact, it felt like it was just beginning. Later that day, as Lena sat in her history class, her mind was in a haze. She couldn't focus. She kept replaying the confrontation in the hallway over and over in her head. Madison was angry, and when Madison was angry, people got hurt. As the bell rang and students packed up their things, Lena slowly gathered her books. She was just about to leave when the door to the classroom opened and Principal Hayes stepped in. "Lena," he said, his voice firm but not unkind, "I need you to come with me." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She followed him out of the room, unsure of what was happening. Was this it? Was the investigation over? The principal's office was quiet when they entered. Mr. Hayes motioned for Lena to sit down across from his desk. He sat down as well, and for a moment the two of them simply looked at each other. "Lena," Mr. Hayes began, his voice steady, "I've completed the investigation. I've reviewed the evidence and spoken to everyone involved." Lena's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of the chair. Her mind raced with possibilities. What was he going to say? "Madison has denied everything. She claims you started the fight, that you provoked her. But there's something I need to tell you." Mr. Hayes paused, taking a deep breath. "We've reviewed the security footage from that day. It's clear that Madison was the one who attacked you first, and there are multiple witnesses who corroborate your story." Lena's heart soared in her chest. This was it. The truth was finally coming out. "I'm going to call Madison and her parents in to discuss the next steps," Mr. Hayes continued. "But Lena, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. This wasn't easy, and you stood your ground. I know this hasn't been an easy road for you." Lena's mind was still reeling. She had done it. The truth had won. She wasn't the victim anymore. That afternoon, after school, Lena found herself standing outside staring at the school building. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over everything, and for the first time in weeks, Lena felt something she hadn't in a long time: peace. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a message from Ava. "They're calling Madison in for a meeting tomorrow. She's finally being held accountable." "You did it, Lena." Lena smiled, feeling a rush of relief flood her system. "We did it," she whispered to herself, her fingers hovering over the screen as she typed a reply. "Thanks for believing in me, Ava. I couldn't have done this without you." The battle wasn't over. Madison wouldn't go down without a fight. But for the first time, Lena knew she had the strength to keep going. The news of Madison's upcoming meeting with Principal Hayes spread like wildfire throughout the school. Everyone seemed to be talking about it, some out of curiosity, others out of a sense of schadenfreude. Lena could feel the eyes of her classmates on her every time she walked through the halls. Some were sympathetic, others were clearly waiting for her to fall. But Lena didn't let it get to her. She had fought for the truth, and now it was out there. Madison couldn't hide behind her lies anymore. She couldn't control everyone around her with fear and manipulation. The day after Principal Hayes had informed her that the investigation had been concluded, Madison seemed to vanish. Lena couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Normally, Madison would have been strutting through the halls, looking for someone to torment. But this time there was an eerie calm. It was the morning of Madison's meeting with the principal. Lena had expected to feel nervous, but instead she felt a sense of quiet determination. This wasn't just about defending herself anymore. It was about standing up to the system that had allowed Madison to thrive for so long. She had the support of her friends, and for the first time it felt like she was no longer invisible. The day passed slowly, and by lunch, Lena found herself sitting with Ava in the cafeteria, a tangle of nerves in her stomach. "Do you think she'll be expelled?" Lena asked, pushing her food around on her plate absent-mindedly. Ava shrugged, a serious expression on her face. "I'm not sure, but I know one thing. This is the beginning of the end for Madison. She's not going to get away with it anymore." Lena nodded. She hoped Ava was right. But deep down, she had a nagging feeling that Madison wasn't the type to just go quietly. That afternoon, Principal Hayes called Lena into his office again. This time, Lena didn't feel the same anxiety she had before. She had already won the battle. But she had no idea that the war was just beginning. When Lena walked into the principal's office, she was surprised to find Madison sitting there, her face a picture of fury. She had a smug, almost predatory look in her eyes, as if she was waiting for Lena to falter. "Lena," Principal Hayes began, his voice calm but serious, "I've heard both sides of the story. I've spoken to the witnesses, reviewed the evidence, and watched the security footage. I want you to know that Madison will face consequences for her actions. But this is a difficult situation for everyone involved." Lena swallowed hard, but she stood her ground. She had been through too much to back down now. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. Principal Hayes sighed. "Madison will be suspended for 3 days, effective immediately. I will also be requiring her to meet with a counselor to address her behavior. However, she has denied some of the more serious allegations, and it's clear that there are still issues with how the situation was handled by some of the other students involved." Lena could feel the tension in her body, the frustration building. This wasn't enough. Madison needed to face real consequences. She needed to be held accountable for everything. And what about the students who saw what happened and didn't speak up? Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are they going to face consequences too?" Principal Hayes hesitated for a moment, clearly uncomfortable. "We're looking into that as well. But Lena, I want you to understand that this is a complicated matter. We can't just punish everyone who stood by without stepping in." Lena's blood ran cold. "So, you're saying it's okay for people to just watch and do nothing?" He didn't answer immediately, and Lena could see that her question had struck a nerve. Finally he spoke, his voice softening. "I'm not saying that, Lena, but we have to follow the rules. I'll make sure that everyone involved is held accountable in some way. And I want you to know that you did the right thing by coming forward." Lena nodded, but the words felt hollow. This wasn't enough. Not for Madison, not for the people who had watched her suffer in silence. As she left the principal's office, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that the system was still protecting the wrong people. Madison had only been suspended for 3 days. That was hardly a punishment for everything she had done. Lena found herself walking down the hallway with her head down, lost in thought. She had hoped for a better outcome, something more final. But instead, it felt like Madison was getting off easy, Later that day, Lena received a text message from Ava. "Lena, I know you're probably pissed, but don't let this stop you. Madison might have won this round, but you've already taken her down a notch. The rest of the school sees who she really is now. That's a huge win." Lena stared at the message for a moment before typing her reply. "Thanks, Ava. I thought it would be more. She's done so much worse." "I know, but you've got something now that she'll never take from you. The truth. And that matters more than anything." Lena smiled softly as she put her phone down. Ava was right. The truth was on her side. Even if Madison hadn't been fully punished, Lena had made it clear to everyone around her that she wasn't someone to mess with. And no matter what happened next, Lena had the power to change the narrative. That night, as Lena lay in bed, she thought about the path ahead. Madison wasn't going to stop, but Lena wasn't going to let her control her life anymore. She had taken the first step in reclaiming her power. And she would continue fighting until Madison knew that she was no longer the one pulling the strings. The next day would be a new battle, and Lena was ready. The next few days after Madison's suspension passed in a blur for Lena. She felt a mixture of relief and unease. On one hand, Madison was finally facing consequences for her actions. On the other hand, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that it was just the beginning of a bigger battle. Despite her suspension, Madison was still a force to be reckoned with, and Lena had no doubt that she wouldn't take her defeat lying down. The whispers in the hallway seemed to grow louder, the atmosphere in the school growing more electric with every passing day. Everyone was waiting to see what Madison would do next. One day after school, as Lena was walking to the bus stop, she felt a sharp tug on her backpack. She turned around to see Madison standing there, flanked by her usual entourage, Brielle and Taylor. Madison's face was a mask of anger, but there was something darker in her eyes. "I hope you're happy, Lena," Madison spat. "You think you've won, don't you?" Lena's heart skipped a beat. She had expected this confrontation, but it didn't make it any easier. "I haven't won anything, Madison, but you can't keep getting away with bullying people." Madison's lips curled into a cold smile. "You really think I've been bullying you?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You have no idea how much power I have. You think a little suspension is going to stop me? Think again." Lena tried to keep her composure, but it was hard. Madison was a master of manipulation, and she had the ability to twist things in her favor. "It's not just about a suspension," Lena said firmly. "It's about making sure people know the truth. You're not going to intimidate me anymore." Madison stepped closer, her voice low and threatening. "You think you got people on your side? You think everyone's going to look at you like some kind of hero? You're nothing but a freak, Lena, and I'll make sure everyone remembers that." Lena stood tall, refusing to let Madison break her. "You don't scare me, Madison. You never did. I'm done letting you control my life." Madison's smirk disappeared, replaced with a look of pure rage. "This isn't over, Lena. You just wait." Without another word, Madison turned and stormed off, her two friends following closely behind. Lena's hands clenched into fists at her sides, but she refused to give Madison the satisfaction of showing fear. That night, Lena couldn't shake the feeling that Madison's words were more than just empty threats. She had no idea what Madison was planning next, but it was clear that the battle was far from finished. Lena sat at her desk, her eyes glued to her phone as she read the latest message from Ava. "Lena, I know it's been tough lately, but you're stronger than you realize. Don't let Madison get to you. She's trying to get into your head. You've got this." Lena smiled as she read the words. Ava was right. Madison could say whatever she wanted, but it wasn't going to stop Lena from being who she was. She had already survived so much, and she wasn't going to let one girl, no matter how powerful, bring her down. The next morning at school, Lena felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was done being afraid of Madison. She had faced down the worst of it, and she knew she could handle whatever came next. However, as Lena walked through the hallways that morning, she could feel the eyes of her classmates on her. Some were sympathetic, while others still whispered behind her back. The divide was growing more apparent. It seemed like everyone had chosen sides, and no matter what she did, There would always be someone who doubted her. As Lena approached her locker, she heard the familiar sound of footsteps behind her. She turned around expecting to see Ava, but instead she came face to face with Brielle. The girl's expression was a mixture of contempt and curiosity. "I don't know why you're still acting like you've won this," Brielle said, her tone biting. "Madison's just getting started. You're going to regret this, Lena." Lena's heart pounded in her chest. She could see that Brielle wasn't just talking about the fight, they were talking about something bigger, something far more dangerous. Madison wasn't going to let this go, not without a full-blown war. "I don't need to win, Brielle," Lena said calmly. "I just need to be myself. And if you can't respect that, then that's your problem, not mine." Brielle's face twisted into a sneer. "You're just a freak, Lena. You always have been, and you'll always be alone." Lena didn't respond. She didn't need to. She had learned long ago that the only power these people had over her was the power she allowed them to have, and she wasn't going to give them that anymore. That afternoon, when the final bell rang, Lena rushed to the bus, eager to get home and escape the toxicity of school. She wanted nothing more than to leave Madison, Brielle, and everyone else behind. But as she walked out of the building, she saw a group of students gathered near the parking lot. Their heads were down, their eyes trained on their phones. As Lena drew closer, she realized what they were looking at. A new video had gone viral. It was a clip of her and Madison's confrontation from a few days ago, the one where Lena had stood up to Madison in front of everyone. But it wasn't just the video. It was the caption, "Lena the Freak vs. Madison the Queen." The video was being shared all over social media, and in an instant, Lena's reputation was back under fire. The caption was meant to ridicule her, to make her look weak and inferior. And now the entire school was watching. Lena felt a wave of nausea rise in her stomach. This was Madison's retaliation, her way of turning the tables. But Lena wouldn't let her win. Not again. She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she typed a message to Ava. "The war isn't over. Madison's going after me again. You've got this. I believe in you," Ava replied almost instantly. Lena took a deep breath and squared her shoulders. She wasn't going to let a video define her. She wasn't going to let Madison's cruelty control her. This was just another fight, and she was ready to stand her ground. Lena woke up the next morning with a pit in her stomach. The video from the confrontation with Madison was all over social media, and she knew that today would be no different. It wasn't just a few whispers in the halls anymore. It was an entire wave of people turning their attention toward her. The humiliation had become public, and she could feel the eyes of the entire school on her. She sat on the edge of her bed, scrolling through the comments on her phone. The caption had gone viral, and some of the posts were downright cruel. "Lena the Freak versus Madison the Queen. Who's the real victim?" Some students were siding with Madison, calling Lena weak for standing up to her. Others were outright mocking her, calling her names like ugly and pathetic. It was like the entire school had become a hostile battleground, and Lena had just been thrust into the middle of it. But this time, she wasn't going to cower in silence. When Lena walked into school that morning, the usual whispers intensified. The students who had previously ignored her now stared openly, some with pity, others with curiosity, as if waiting for her to crack under the pressure. She could hear their quiet conversations as she passed by. "Did you see the video?" "Yeah. She looks so pathetic." It's crazy how she thought she could take down Madison. No one does that. But amidst the negativity, there were also a few students who gave her encouraging nods or smiled at her, as if to say, "We're with you." It was a small comfort, but it was enough to remind her that not everyone was joining the mob mentality. At lunch, Lena found a quiet corner in the cafeteria to sit by herself. She wasn't in the mood for more pitying looks or whispered comments. As she unpacked her lunch, her phone buzzed with another message from Ava. "Hey, I saw the video." "I know. It sucks, but don't let it get to you. You're stronger than they think. Remember who you are." Lena stared at the message for a long time. Ava was always there when she needed her the most, and that meant everything. Lena typed a reply. "It's hard. It feels like everyone's against me." "They're not, Lena. You just have to ignore the noise. You know who you are. You've got this." Lena took a deep breath and put her phone down. Ava was right. The video might have gone viral, but that didn't change who she was. Madison might have used social media to try to break her, but Lena wasn't going to let it define her. As the day wore on, Lena could feel the weight of the whispers and stares. But it wasn't just the students who were making her feel this way. She could sense the tension in the air, the unspoken pressure from the teachers too. It was as if everyone was silently watching to see how she would react, waiting for her to fall apart. And then came the moment that would change everything. Lena was walking to her next class when she saw Madison in the hallway, surrounded by her usual group of followers. Madison caught Lena's eye and smirked, a look of pure satisfaction on her face. "You're really a piece of work, Lena," Madison sneered. "Did you really think you could win? You've made yourself a target for the whole school." Lena didn't flinch. She wasn't going to give Madison the satisfaction of seeing her upset. "I'm not a target, Madison. You can try to bring me down all you want, but it won't work. I'm done letting you control me." Madison's smirk faltered, but she quickly recovered, leaning in close. "You've made this personal, Lena, and trust me, when you make things personal with me, I always win." Lena swallowed the anger rising in her chest. This was the moment she had been dreading. The moment when Madison made it clear that the stakes had been raised. But instead of backing down, Lena straightened her shoulders and met Madison's gaze. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," Lena said quietly, her voice steady. Madison laughed, a sharp, cold sound that sent chills down Lena's spine. "You should be." As Lena made her way to class, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get much worse. Madison was already going after her on social media, and now she was threatening her in person. The pressure was building, and Lena knew that she couldn't do this alone. During fifth period, she got a message from Ryan, a boy she'd been friendly with since the beginning of the school year. He was one of the few people who hadn't jumped on the bandwagon of hatred. "Hey, I saw the video. I just wanted you to know that I think what you did was brave. If you need someone to talk to or hang out with, I've got your back." Lena felt a small flicker of hope. She wasn't completely alone. There were people who saw the situation for what it was and weren't swayed by Madison's manipulation. Later that afternoon, the principal called an emergency assembly. The entire school gathered in the gym, and Principal Hayes took the stage. He didn't waste any time addressing the issue. "We are aware of the situation involving the video that has gone viral. As many of you know, this has caused division and tension within our student body. While we encourage healthy debate and differing opinions, we will not tolerate harassment, bullying, or the spread of harmful content. It's important that we treat one another with respect." Lena sat in the bleachers, listening to Principal Hayes speak. It was comforting to hear the school acknowledge the issue, but she also knew that it wasn't enough. Madison was still out there, still pulling the strings. She wasn't going to stop until Lena was completely destroyed. That night, as Lena lay in bed staring at her phone, she couldn't help but feel like the weight of the entire school was on her shoulders. The video was everywhere, and even with the principal's words, the bullying wasn't stopping. Madison was powerful, and Lena knew she was just getting started, but she wasn't about to let Madison win. Not now. Not ever. Lena typed a message to Ava. "I can't keep doing this. It feels like it's never going to end." Ava's reply was immediate. "It's going to end, Lena. It has to. But you've got to stay strong. You're the one who controls your story. Don't let anyone else define you." Lena stared at the message for a long moment before typing her reply. "Thanks, Ava. I'm not giving up. Not yet." The final bell of the day rang, signaling the end of another long, tense day. But for Lena, it was the beginning of something bigger. She had spent the last few weeks under fire, fighting against Madison and the cruelty of her classmates. But today, everything changed. Today, Lena was no longer going to hide or be afraid. She had made up her mind. It had been nearly a week since the viral video, and the fallout was still rippling through the school. People were talking, speculating, and Madison's followers were relentless. Every day was another battle, and while Lena had tried to keep her head high, it was becoming harder to ignore the whispers, the stares, and the relentless social media posts designed to break her down. But something inside her had shifted. The constant pressure, the insults, and the stares, they didn't define her. She had the power to choose how this story ended, and she wasn't going to let Madison or anyone else control her anymore. Lena had spent the night thinking about what she wanted to say, what kind of person she wanted to be moving forward. She didn't want to let the pain of the past few weeks dictate her future. She had to stand up for herself, for her right to exist without fear, without apology. When she arrived at school the next morning, she was ready. She wore her head held high, her heart steady. As she walked through the hallways, she ignored the stares, the snickers, and the eyes following her every move. This time, she wasn't afraid. At lunch, she sat alone at her usual spot in the cafeteria, but today, she wasn't alone in her resolve. Ava and Ryan had sent her messages throughout the morning, offering their support, and their words were still fresh in her mind. Lena took a deep breath as she pulled out her phone. The video was still all over social media, but this time, instead of hiding from it, she was going to face it head-on. She had something to say, something Madison would never expect. Lena opened her Instagram and began typing a post. She could feel the weight of her words, the eyes of the school potentially watching, but she didn't care. This was her moment. To everyone who's been following the drama lately, I want to say this. I am not ashamed of who I am. I'm not going to hide or be embarrassed because of the things people have said or done to me. We all have our struggles, and we all have our battles. This isn't about me versus Madison or about who's right or wrong. It's about standing up for what's right, for treating people with kindness and respect, no matter what they look like or where they come from. To those who've been supportive, thank you. You make me believe in the power of kindness. To those who've tried to tear me down, just know that I'm still here, and I'm not going anywhere. Lena hit post and sat back, her heart racing. She knew this wasn't just a message for Madison or the students who'd been cruel. This was a declaration for herself. She was done being afraid, done hiding in the shadows. It was time to step into the light, to own her story. Just as Lena set her phone down, she saw a familiar face walking toward her. Madison. This was it. The final confrontation. Madison had been on her radar all week, and now she was here, walking straight toward Lena with her usual smug expression, as if this was all a game. Lena stood up slowly, facing her. She could feel her pulse quicken, but her hands were steady. It was time for the truth to be heard. Are you going to keep playing the victim, Lena? Madison sneered, crossing her arms. You really think this post is going to change anything? Lena met her gaze head-on, not flinching. No, Madison, I'm not playing the victim. I'm just telling the truth that you've been trying to bury. I'm not afraid of you anymore. I'm not afraid of what you say or do. Madison's eyes narrowed, the smugness slipping off her face for a moment. You think you can stand up to me? Do you have any idea who I am? I'll make you regret this. Lena's heart was steady, her resolve stronger than ever. You can try, Madison, but I'm not going to be your punching bag anymore. You've spent your whole life trying to tear people down, trying to make yourself feel better. But that's not who I am, and it's not who I'm going to be. Madison took a step forward, her voice lower and more dangerous. You think you've won? You think people care about what you say? You're just a nobody. Lena took a step forward too, her voice calm but unwavering. Maybe I'm a nobody in your eyes, but that doesn't mean I don't matter. I matter. And I'm not going to let you or anyone else tell me otherwise. For a moment there was silence. The air was thick with tension, the weight of everything that had happened between them pressing down on both of them. Madison opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, Lena turned and walked away, not waiting for a response. Lena made her way to the bathroom, her heart pounding, but there was a sense of peace in her chest. She had said what needed to be said. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. The battle wasn't over, but she knew she had won this round. She had taken control of her life, and no one could take that away from her. As Lena walked back to the cafeteria, her phone buzzed. She pulled it out and saw a notification. Her post had gone viral. The support was pouring in, comments, likes, and messages of encouragement from students all over the school. Even a few teachers had chimed in, praising her bravery. But the most important message came from Ava. You did it. You're amazing, Lena. You took back your power. Lena smiled, wiping away the tears that had gathered in her eyes. This was her victory. Not because she'd beaten Madison, but because she had found her voice, her strength. Epilogue. The next few weeks were a blur of change. Madison's power over the school began to wane. She still had her followers, but the tide was shifting. More students started standing up to her, refusing to be intimidated, and slowly but surely, the cruelty she had once spread began to crumble. Lena didn't let her guard down, but she knew that she had done something important. She had shown that standing up for yourself wasn't about being perfect. It was about being true to who you were, even when the world tried to tear you down. And for the first time in a long time, Lena felt at peace with who she was. She wasn't defined by the cruelty of others or the mistakes of the past. She was strong, and no one, least of all Madison, could take that away from her. Lena had found her strength, her voice, and her place in the world. And she knew now, without a doubt, that no one could ever make her feel small again.